Tanner Clark is an international motivational speaker dedicated to empowering teens to reclaim happiness by ditching digital devices, reconnecting in real life, and embracing their self-worth. With nearly a decade of experience working with youth, he has inspired thousands through his 1 second of strength message, including on the TEDx stage, helping them to create habits that unlock their potential. Host of the Second of Strength podcast, Tanner has reached millions via social media, podcasts, and news appearances, sharing practical strategies to help young people focus on what truly matters. Thank you so much, Tanner, for your time and for talking to me.
Of course. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
I want to start with your TEDx talk, which I
Sure.
loved. So in that talk, you told the story of the moment you ditched your phone to be attentive to your daughter's needs. And I just want to throw in a statistic here. The average adult spends 67 days distracted per year. You talk a lot about distraction in your work. So my question is, how do you think parental distraction from technology is affecting our kids?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's huge and everything. I mean, there's studies out there that show that teenagers and kids who are loved by their parents and feel loved by their parents grow up to be more successful. It shows that the hippocampus grows and develops at a faster rate when those kids feel loved. And I think today, too many kids are feeling that their parents love their phones more than they love them. And I just believe I've said this before. I'll say it till I'm blue in the face, till every parent hears it. But when we are putting our phones in between us and our kids, we are simultaneously increasing the value of our phones and decreasing the value of our kids. And I think that the biggest risk, and look, when kids are young, they are in a world of self-discovering. They are understanding who they are, where their life is going, and they're starting to have these core beliefs about themselves, especially middle school. Middle school is like the toughest time of life for kids, and then they kind of grow into high school, and they start to develop a little bit more. But that middle school time is such this formative age when our kids are learning about who they are, and they're gathering all these beliefs about themselves. And the worst thing we can do is, as parents, is start putting beliefs in our own kids that they are not worthy, that they are not good enough, that there are more things more important than them, than for me, and so I think that, I don't know, I just think that it's one of the travesties of the world. And unfortunately, I think the biggest travesty is that we just don't realize it. We're just
Yeah.
picking up our phones because we as adults are addicted to our phones, just like our kids are addicted to our phones. And we pick them up and we start looking at them, and we don't realize we immediately block out the surroundings in our own home so that we can focus on things that are out of our home. I think it's the worst thing that can happen. And I'm not perfect at it. It's something that I am conscientiously thinking about. But I believe that growth comes through awareness. If we want to grow as a society, as a people, and become the best versions of us, then it really takes awareness. And so when us as parents are aware of what's going on in our own homes, in our own lives, in our own digital worlds, then we can start to change. And I think that's what we need to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said is so huge about modeling, and it's one of the things we talk a lot about in our parent eds. And
Hmm.
I think it's one of the things that parents don't want to hear. They don't want to hear that they have to make changes in their own digital habits in order for that to trickle down to their kids. But research does say that parent screen habits do trickle down to the kids, whether they're problematic or whether they're, good habits. So they have to model the habits that they want to see, and
Absolutely.
especially, yeah. And especially, like you said, when you get into that middle school age, when they're younger, you might be able to get away with the do as I say, not as I do concept, but they will call you out once they get to that middle into the high school years. And I don't think parents realize that their kids are still watching them by that age, right?
Well,
So,
they are, and I think you might be able to get away with it at when your kids are younger. Um, but what you don't get away with when your kids are younger is that you're still teaching them, right? I mean,
yeah,
our kids are learning from us from the moment they come out, right? Like they learn to smile within 2, 3 months, right? And they learn to smile based on watching us smile. And
Yeah.
so from the moment they're born, they are learning from us. Well, don't for 1 minute think that because your kids are 6 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, that they don't see us on their phones. I mean, my son, his name's Beckett, but for some reason he told his kindergarten teacher that his name was Bob. So my son Bob, if I pick up my phone and he comes and sits by me, he says this: "Are you on Instagram?" Just like that. Like, because he knows in a mocking way, because he understands that there's something else in the home that is pulling my attention away from him. And so, yes, middle school, they may not have a phone until middle school, high school, and hopefully much after middle school, because I think middle school is way too soon for a phone.
Yeah.
But don't think for a second that the behaviors aren't ingrained in them from when they're younger.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's definitely like a third party in the room, right? You
Yeah.
kind of touched on that. Okay, so I wanted to ask you about this idea of moral panic
Mm-hmm.
and to define that a little bit for those that might not know. It's this pervasive belief that some kind of great wickedness is threatening society and it must be stopped. So, my question to you, because I hear a little bit of this pushback sometimes from parents, is the use of smartphone and social media by kids and teens, is this a moral panic issue?
Yes and no. I mean, is probably the real answer there. I think that, if you spend as a parent, if you spend all your time watching media and watching viral videos and things like that, you're going to get a sense of the world, and the world is going to be negative. Because here's what's happening on social media and in actual media is that everybody is vying for your attention. Everybody is vying for your time, and so they're going to say things that are going to cause panic in your life, in your world. And so on one hand, yes, I do think that there is a lot of moral panic out there. However, the statistics would show that the panic is real. Statistics would show that teenagers are being negatively impacted by social media, and the science would show that too. A teenager's brain doesn't develop in their head. The logical decision making, the prefrontal cortex, doesn't develop in their head until studies show around the age of 25 years old. Well, that means that before that, when they are in high school, when they are in middle school, their brains are emotional brains. And what's happening is that if you give your kids a smartphone and you give them social media, then that brain that is underdeveloped is going to war with the smartest people in the world, with
Yeah.
the people who are creating devices and creating smartphones and creating social media and vying for your kids' attention. And the sad part is they know exactly how to do it. They know exactly how to grab their attention and exactly what to say. And so the reality is that if you give your kids a smartphone and if they have social media, they don't stand a chance emotionally. They just don't. And
Yeah.
so is every kid going to be negatively impacted the same way? The answer is no. There are some kids who are more mature. There are some kids there. I mean, there's waves of kids out there who are like, I don't even want social media anymore. Or when I go and speak in schools, they come up afterwards and go, hey, I didn't realize it was making me sad like it was, but you're right. I just deleted Snapchat. Like they get rid of this stuff after I talk to
Yeah.
them, but they don't realize it in the moment. And so I think that, to answer your question, yeah, there's a lot of moral panic out there, but a lot of it is for a good reason, and including the U.S. Attorney General, who just came, or the Surgeon General, excuse me, who just came out months ago and said, hey, we need to actually have warnings on social media because there is a teen mental health crisis here, and the statistics are showing it. So I don't know. I struggle. I struggle when parents, and I talk to with a lot of parents, as you do. I struggle when they give their kids a smartphone and have a not my kid mentality. But the
Yeah.
reality is that, yeah, your kid is going to struggle with this because I love your kid as much as you love your kid, but your kid's not special. Their brain is still underdeveloped. And the result of that is that regardless, they're going to see something on social media that's going to draw them in. They're going to experience emotions. They're going to experience things that are going to bring them more into the social world, and the grip on them is not going to loosen ever. And
Yeah.
so I don't know. I don't know if I answered the question, but yes and no.
No,
It's real and it's not real.
you definitely did. And you touched on two things that I always touch on when people say, oh, people panicked when we had TV, people panicked when we had radio. There's a lot of differences. And the main thing is what you said, I think, which is you talked about like your kid being against the smartest people in the world. I didn't make this up. I think Tristan Harris said this, but he said the biggest difference between now and then is there wasn't thousands of engineers on the other side of your TV or the other side of your telephone tweaking and fine tuning it in real time to make it more and more sticky. Like that
Yeah.
is just not a comparison. And
Yeah.
you touched on that. And the other key difference is I'm sure you and I are of a similar era. We probably grew up with TV, right? There weren't young people rising up against the technology of their time back then, like you're seeing
Sure.
now. Like you're talking about the teens and their self-awareness of deleting the apps once they're aware. There are, and I've talked to so many of them, there are, I don't know how many youth movements going on right now in this space of young people creating nonprofits, speaking out about these issues, going to testify in Congress. Like you have never seen that.
Mm-mm.
So it is different. And I think you hit the nail on the head too when you said obviously different kids will be affected in different ways. But I wholeheartedly agree that your kid will be infected in some way, right? Like you may or may not
Absolutely.
see it. It may or may not be the horror story. They might be on the right side of the statistics, but it's still adult technology. So we've
Yes.
got underdeveloped, minds driving adult technology,
Yep.
basically. So
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, I think you covered it all, but I just wanted to kind of stress on those 2 points, which I think are really important that you brought up. So, okay, so let's talk about a little bit about opportunity cost. So teens are now spending almost 5 hours a day on social media alone. I think it goes up to like 9 if you include everything else.
Hmm.
And so that is 21% of their teen years and 1.5 years of living between the ages of 13 to 19. When I calculated this, I just couldn't believe it. So, why do you think this is? I think we touched on this a little bit already. And what are your tips for teens to regain control of your time?
Well, I mean, the reason is what we talked about, right? It's that these devices are going to grab onto them and grab hold on it. And every feature that is on the phone was designed with them in mind, right? The features on your phone, they're not a bug, they're not a mistake. They're designed that way. They're designed with you and specifically teenagers in mind to keep them there longer, and because it's a financial monetary system at the end of the day, right? The longer you are on your phone, the more ads you're going to be served, and the more ads you're going to be served, the more Mark Zuckerberg or whoever else makes, right? That's the model. It's your time for their value and their money.
Yeah.
And so that's the reason. But when it comes to teenagers, I think that, the first thing I teach teenagers when I go into schools is that I want them to recognize that they're in control of their life, not the phone, nobody else, and not even their parents. At the end of the day, there's nobody else out there. There's people who love them, there's people who support them, there's people who care for them, but at the end of the day, their life, their control, right? They get to decide how their life is going to go. And so I first really want teens to just be empowered by the knowledge that they have the power, even at 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, to make significant changes in their lives. And the reason is because when you recognize that control, then you can make those steps to change. It all comes down to knowing where you're at and knowing where you want to go. And it may be as simple as, what do you want out of life? Well, I just want to be happier. Okay, if you want to be happier, and this is where you are, and this is your goal of being happy, and you're saying there's a disconnect in between those two things, then what is causing that disconnect in the middle? What is causing that? And now we need to make some shifts. So I talked in the TEDx talk about the SOS approach, the second of strength approach. And what this is the very first part of that. The S is, I want you to set your intentions. What do you want out of your life? And I'm not saying you have to have it all figured out, because teenagers don't have to have it all figured out. I didn't know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that we were going to be on this call and that I'd be speaking in schools. I didn't know that, so how would we possibly know at 17 years old what we want out of life? We don't, right? But you do know some core values. You do know some things that you want to get out of the next little bit of your life. So set your intentions on what that is. The next piece of that is observe your behavior. Just track yourself. How are you doing on those objectives, on those goals? What do you want? How is your self-worth being impacted? And then once you observe that behavior, and you may see, you know what, I'm not happy. Is social media, is the time, is those 5 hours that you just mentioned, is that part of the reason why I'm not happy? Yes, no. You can go through a checklist. Well, am I comparing myself to other people? Am I spending a lot of time? And you talked about opportunity costs. Is that time that I could be doing something else that would be getting me closer to my goal? And I'm not anti social media. I have it. And and for the most part, like, kids are going to have it, and they're going to see some good stuff on social media. They're going to see some
Yeah.
positive quotes. They're going to see some really good stuff. But is are they leaning, or is the algorithm taking them down a path that maybe they shouldn't go down? And so, but awareness comes to that. And once you recognize what the behavior and what's going on, then you make that shift. And I do that with your 1 second of strength. I just believe you have the power in 1 second to hack your brain, hack that emotional brain that we have there, and make a different choice. You have 1 second of strength where you can choose to put down your phone. You have 1 second of strength where you can choose a better behavior in any given moment. And then the next second, make another choice. And then the next second, make another choice. And when we start piling on this compound effect of positivity in our life, negativity almost ceases to exist. Or if it does pop up in our life, we can immediately step in and change it again, because I don't know, just too many teenagers are struggling with the self-worth aspect of life. And a lot of that comes down to the things that they're seeing on social media. And so we
Yeah.
can make those shifts, and teenagers have the power to make that. And they've proven it to me time and time again.
Yeah. I love your message of empowering kids, because we really do that as well, as young as kids that are 4 in
Yeah.
TK, because we believe that if you teach them about the mechanics of what's going on in your brain and your body when you interact with technology, and you mentioned awareness, like in that 1 second, right? Like sometimes that's all you need. Sometimes you're just not aware of
Yeah.
what's happening, especially when you're a kid, right? And you're engaging with these technologies. But once you are and you understand the mechanics a little bit, I agree with you that I think kids can make really, really good choices, or at least, better than if they hadn't had it. They can regain control a little bit more,
Yeah.
right?
And we have an
Um,
important job in that as parents, because I think that change management, and here we're talking about personal change management, right? But
yeah,
change management would show that we need to celebrate those victories. And so,
yeah,
like, for teenagers, and I think as parents, we can call out these moments and reinforce positive behaviors in our kids. But as teenagers, when they make these significant changes in their lives, because they felt like, oh, maybe it's an influencer that they unfollow because they've been comparing themselves to it. But the moment the moment they unfollow that influencer, that's the moment I reinforce with teenagers. Because I
yeah,
always say, when you find your 1 second of strength to distance yourself from the thing that's hurting your heart, and it may be deleting an app, it may be unfollowing an influencer, but when you find your 1 second of strength to distance yourself from the thing that's hurting your heart, the very next second will be the best second of your life. Because in that moment, there is a weight that is lifted off your shoulder. And I want teenagers not to remember the negativity that they felt on social media. I want them to remember the positivity of the moment that they got rid of something, that they made a positive change in their life. Because when we recognize that moment, then we can continue to make positive changes, because we know what it feels like, and we'll start to crave that positivity going forward.
yeah. And I think what you said there is so key, because we message this all the time, which is, and we're not anti tech either. I'm a social media marketer. I've been
Hmm.
doing this my whole career
Yeah.
and I still do. But a healthy relationship to us means we're in control of the technology and
Yep.
not the other way around. So when you talk
Absolutely.
about those incremental steps, they're very manageable, but that's kind of part of this process of saying, look, we can use this, but I'm in the driver's seat and not
Yep.
this app controlling me. So I think that's
Absolutely.
huge, and I agree with you that I think kids can do it. So I want to ask you a little bit more about this idea of young people pushing back. I know we touched on it already, but the latest statistics say that 47% of Gen Z adults, so people in their young 20s, say they wish TikTok was never invented. 45% say they won't allow their own kids to have smartphones until at least high school. So, why do you think this is? Why do you think young people are rising up to push back on the technology of their time?
I think that the great, I think if we had a common denominator of what everybody wants out of this life, I think people just want to be happy. Like I just whether you're 5 years old and like what's going to make you happy is another cookie, or whether you're 12 years old or 15 years old, or you're old like I am, right? Like at some point, you just want to be happier. And I think that teenagers are starting to recognize that there is one thing in their lives that is creating dissatisfaction. And and then that empowerment is coming in where they're stepping in and making these positive changes in their lives. And what I love is, like, I think, you go back to, this this crises, and like, is it made up, is it not? And the reality is that teenagers are recognizing that they can make a change. And this generation coming up, like, I don't know, like, they're the ones who do things. They get stuff done, right? Like when they want something, like we've seen it time and time again throughout the media, like when Gen Z wants something, they figure out how to do it, right? And I think that they're starting to want happiness and recognizing that happiness doesn't come from a device.
Yeah.
Happiness comes outside of that device. And I hope it's a groundswell. Like, I hope that they pass that on and pass that on, pass that on. And like, and it's interesting because when I go speak in schools, the comments I get from parents are, thank goodness you're here, because they don't want to hear it from me. And that's true. And
Yeah.
the school counselors are like, thank goodness you're here, because they don't want to hear it from us and the teachers. And that's true. So I get to be this third party. But at some point, they're not even going to want to hear it from me. They're going to want to hear
Yeah.
it from their peers
Yeah.
who are their age and are going to be able to show them that they had a positive impact and a positive change in their life. And here's how you can do it too. At some point, that peer-to-peer connection is going to be the groundswell that probably saves the future generations
Yeah.
going forward.
Yeah, when we do our middle and high school assemblies, we bring in a youth co-speaker
Cool.
always,
Love that.
because our philosophy is exactly what you just said. They don't want to hear it from me. Yeah, I can give a lot of good insights because I'm basically under the hood of these things every day. But at the end of the day, they want to hear from people of their own age. So
Awesome.
I think it's huge. I think it's great, and I agree. Again, as a marketer, my job is to watch trends, and I've been watching this for quite a long time. We are absolutely at a tipping point. There's just no question about that, in a good way. Young people are recognizing it. You mentioned the Surgeon General warnings, the endless lawsuits, the legislation. We've got countries, counties, school districts, like governments top to bottom starting to make changes. So we are absolutely there. But I do think a big part of it is the kids are becoming aware too. In
Yeah.
my experience, it happens when they get a little bit older, right? It's really
Yep.
hard in middle school and even early high school. But by junior, senior year, I feel like that is the age where I'm seeing kids saying, yeah, I really don't even like this. I don't even
Yep.
think it's really good for me. I don't know if you have the same experience.
Yeah, I do. And I think that just comes down to that brain development, right? Like,
Yeah.
they are, when you think about it, and we talked about 25 being that age where the brain is fully developed, and that's going to be sooner and later than some kids. But 17, 18 is a lot closer to 25 years old
Yeah.
than 12 is, right? And
Totally.
and I see it. I mean, it's comical to me. I always laugh a little bit in school assemblies, because in a middle school, my presentation, the sixth graders react very differently in an emotional way, like a crazy emotional way, than even the eighth graders do. Because
Yeah.
just sixth to eighth grade, there's an emotional maturity that's come
Huge.
where they're just a little bit more on top of it. And then you get into freshmen and then on up to seniors, like you're saying. And so I think it's that. But I think the warning here is, yes, there's a groundswell. Yes, there's a lot of positive momentum. Australia coming out in the last couple of weeks and saying,
Yeah.
hey, we're shutting it down for under 16 years old. I wouldn't be surprised if New Zealand and some other countries follow. Um, but don't underestimate the power of big tech and
Yeah.
their ability to infiltrate the mind of this generation, because they've been doing it. And like you said a few minutes ago, there are thousands of engineers who are on the other side of that phone and also hearing that groundswell and they are worried about their bottom dollar. So they will continue to fight their fight against us and against our kids.
Yeah, and it's not a fair fight, like you said
It's not.
earlier. So for sure. And this is where the parents come in, right? Because at the end of
Yep.
the day, we're buying the devices. We're, still generally a little bit more in control, right? At least in the middle
Yeah.
school years, maybe into the early high school years. So the parents are the front line, I always
Yep.
say, right?
They
To all
are.
of this.
They are. But
Yeah.
they need to know that, right? Because too many
Yes.
parents are giving these phones to their kids way too young. I mean, you probably see it when you go and speak at schools, but like, I mean, I'll ask kindergartners, how many of y'all have
Yeah.
a smartphone? And 50% of kindergartners are raising their hand, and I'm just
Yeah.
like crying inside
Yeah.
because I know the uphill battle that they're about to face. And so
Yeah.
parents just have to recognize that they are the front line. They are the
Mhm.
ones, nobody else, right? Like it's got to be them. We can't rely on, like, Australia. Shout out to Australia for everything that they did from a government perspective. At the end of the day, it still comes down to the parents. The parents are the
Yeah.
ones who are going to have to recognize that and enforce that in their home. And so in the United States, we don't need to wait for government to step in here and like
Yeah.
solve our problems, because they're not going to. We have to do it in our own home. It starts here in my house.
Yeah. So let's push on that a little bit more then. And I know you alluded to this earlier when you talked about keeping them out of middle school, but
Mhm.
um, we advocate for a slow tech approach at Dopamine, and I know you do as well. So what would be your ages and stages recommendations for smartphones and social media?
Yeah, I always tell parents that, you know, before a certain age, kids just don't need it. What they need is a communication device. And so like I think that there's this young age where it's, call it elementary school, but 6 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old. Like if you need to get in touch with them, get them a watch of some sort. There's lots of great companies out there that do that, and your listeners may know them all, but like Gab Wireless has one, uh,
Yeah.
Bark just came out with a watch.
Yeah.
T-Mobile has one. Verizon has one. Like, there's lots of watches out there, but get them a communication device where they can connect with you if they need to, or somebody that they need to get in touch with that is approved, but it's not any access to anything. So I'd say 6 to 9 years old. From there, 10 to 11, 12, I still recommend no smartphones, nothing. Like just step them up into like a Gab phone,
Hmm.
where it's still no social media, still no internet access. Um, and so that's kind of takes care of that, like elementary school through, call it seventh grade. From
Hmm.
there, eighth grade, ninth grade, I recommend getting the driver's licenses of phones. So there's lots of other phones out there now. So the Bark phone is a great one. It's probably my favorite, but TrueMe, Pinwheel phones are great phones where you as a parent get to control what goes on that phone. So
Yeah.
the Bark phone, as an example, you can make that a dumb phone. It can be just talk and text, or I can be like, okay, yep, you can have these apps for school. You can have some, church scriptures apps. You can have ESPN. You could even give Amazon Music, but you can slowly introduce this world um, of apps without social media, without internet access. And then when you feel like you can give internet access, then you can do that. But so, and I don't think that should be before ninth grade, um, getting into high school. But one thing I tell parents all the time is that part of it is your kid ready for a smartphone and social media, which studies show that they're not until later. But part of it is, are you ready for the responsibility that
Yeah.
comes with giving your kids a smartphone? Are you ready to manage it? Are you ready to monitor it? Are you ready to be very involved and active in their digital life like you are in their physical life?
Yep.
Because most parents don't understand that when you give their kids a smartphone, the work starts.
Yep.
Like it should have started before, but it is like in a really serious way. You need to be present in that. So I always tell parents, if your kids have a device, or sorry, if your kids have an app, you better have that app too. You better
Yeah.
learn and download it first. You need to download it. You need to understand if it's, and I hate Snapchat for any age kids, but say it's Snapchat. And I call it crap chat, just so we're clear, because that's what I think about it. But if your
I
kids have
agree.
crap chat, then you need to download it first, and you need to just start exploring, start understanding the ins and outs of it, what it is, what's going on, who you can follow, who you can unfollow, how it is, who can reach out to you. Like, start exploring that, because that's the world you're about to give your kids. And then when your kids get it, you better be on Snapchat too, so you see what's going on. Like
Yeah.
pay attention. And I just don't think most parents are there or ready for that. They just think it's like, yeah, have fun and go do your thing, and go whatever.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what I recommend. And then so I think that took us to like ninth grade on these
Yeah.
learner permit phones. And then as you feel like your teenager's ready, and as you're ready to monitor it, then even on those learners permit phones, you can slowly start giving more access.
Yep.
You can give access to the internet search. Make sure you're paying attention to their searches. For my son, it wasn't until 15 years old we gave him access to Be Real. He doesn't have Instagram. He doesn't have any other social media apps. But we said, all right, let's start with Be Real. Let's see how you handle this, what's going on, and then we'll have more conversations. And so it's just a way to continuously, be present in their lives and help monitor them. And then from there, always the question is, well, what about an iPhone? When can we get them an iPhone? And it goes back to the answer I just gave. Like, when do you feel you're ready to help your kids through that? When are you ready to lock it down? Are you ready to be present in that phone? But I don't think it should be before 16 years old by any
Yeah.
means. And I know, in certain parts, and I don't know where your listeners are from, but like, whether it's United Kingdom or Canada, like, they don't have access to these great phones that we have in the United States to help teach our kids. And so from that, you've got to either get them a flip phone, get them just a communication device, or be really, really knowledgeable about that smartphone, about that iPhone, so you can put on the restrictions, put on family share, and all those things, so that you can be really present in that device and in your child's digital life.
That's amazing. I think you did cover it all, and I agree with all of your recommendations. I think the biggest takeaway from me, and this is what I tell parents, is the less you give, the less you have to oversee, right?
Yeah,
And like for me, again, I'm in the tech industry. I understand this stuff. I use social media every day for my work. So I know how much is involved, right, in overseeing it. And that's one of my biggest reasons for delaying. My oldest son's in sixth grade and he doesn't have anything yet. He doesn't even have a watch or anything. And I can explain why I do that as well. But again, the biggest thing is I know what's involved once I
yeah,
do give it, all the conversations we have to have, all the monitoring I need to do, and I'm just not ready for that. He doesn't need it.
no,
And I'll tell you the reason why I haven't gotten him anything yet. I mean, first of all, I do have a lot of what we call digital privilege, which means the way we define it is, I have a partner, I have babysitters, I can reach him with by his teachers. Like, he's never in a place where he's by
yeah,
himself, right? If I was divorced or something like that, I understand, where parents might want to reach their kid directly, but we don't have that. And
yeah,
for me, the biggest theme is resilience. And I had a conversation the other day with Dr. Tova Klein. I don't know if you know who she is, but she's an early childhood specialist and she's written many books on resilience. And so for me, I don't want him to be able to call me or text me for any little thing he might need, right? Because
yeah,
it's okay if I'm 5 minutes late. He can sit and be uncomfortable for 5 minutes. And to me, until he's at a place in his life where maybe he is going to places by himself or without an adult or something like that, like, it just doesn't even make sense on a practical level.
sure,
And yeah, he's being left out a little bit, right? Because he's one of the last ones to not have it. But he's also already starting to see what good things or what bad things he's being left out of as
yeah,
well. So again, I think there is some obviously variation there where some parents might feel they need that communication device earlier, but no kid, and in fact, no adult even ever needs a smartphone. Like,
yeah,
let's just put that out there. It is
yeah. You're
not a
right.
need. It is a
You're
want.
right.
And then I'll just throw in one more thing about the 16 plus, which seems to be the latest expert consensus for social media. To me, I think it makes a lot of sense because it is as much responsibility, if not more, than driving a car. And that's the age where
Sure.
we say, hey, like, let's start letting kids do this. And I do think it makes sense to maybe do it with them for a couple years before they're out on their own, right? So that makes sense to me in a couple ways. But one thing you can also do is say, and I think you mentioned this too, like which one app would you like to have, right? Like don't give them all of them. Like even
Yeah.
at that age, they can say, hey, I'd really like TikTok, or I'd really like Instagram, or whatever. And not only does it make it easier, it cuts down on time and it solves a
Yeah.
lot of the issues that we're talking about. So I know I threw a lot of extra things in there.
No,
And I don't know if you
it's
want to
right.
respond
And
to that.
well, I think one, it's I think a lot of experts are saying 16 plus at this point. And I think that's a great guide because I think too many parents are giving smartphones and social media at 11. I
Yeah.
think 11 is kind of the average age that they're getting them. And so like I'm glad that we're starting to increase the conversation up to 16. But I would also say that studies show that 17 years old for girls is the most amount of time that they spend scrolling Instagram at
Yeah.
17 years old. And
Yeah.
so you'd think that might be, 14 or 15 years old for a teenage girl, but studies are showing that it's even later. And so if we are giving, so call it 16, but that doesn't mean that we're in safe waters at this point, right? Like we
No.
still need to be really careful. And but I also think that there is this gap where at depending on your family dynamics, but at 18 years old, your kids a lot of times are going to leave your home and go to college.
Yeah.
And so I talk with a lot of parents who are really strict and say no, they will never get social media or smartphone until they're 18 years old and gone.
Yeah.
And I don't like if that's the way you want to go, that's fine. That's up to you. But I also like the idea of having a little bit of time under my roof where I
Yes.
can help guide them through, because I think at the end of the day, um, there's some of my core methodology here is I think we want our kids to be happy, and I think we want them to be good adults. Like that's my goal as a dad. Like I just want my kids to be good adults, and at some point they're going to leave, and I hope that they're good adults and all the things that I taught them are good. And I think to do that, it's building a foundation of trust and guiding and protecting them. Well,
Yeah.
if I don't give them a smartphone until 18 years old and out of their house, then I'm missing a core opportunity for me in my home to guide and protect them.
Yeah.
And I think that we need to think about that as parents. And so, again, if 17 is when they're scrolling the most, then let's have that conversation with them. But at some point, they're going to leave our home. And I'd rather them leave with tools and knowledge than leave and have to figure it all out. And I do want them to figure it out. You talked about resilience. I think that one of the greatest tragedies of the social media age and smartphones is that our kids are becoming less resilient. They're
Yeah.
spending so much time scrolling and not enough time solving the problems that they have. They're deferring all their problems. But if we don't give them a smartphone until 18, then we're missing some of that core responsibility of a parent that we have an opportunity to impact them for their future.
For sure. I could agree with you more. And I will add one more thing, which is I would say 16 plus with limits, like time limits
Absolutely.
to
There.
work. I have time
Yep.
limits on my phone and I'm an adult,
Yep.
like you do need to have that stopping point to kind of
Yep.
help you. I'd love to ask you just one more thing if I
Sure.
can. So in our work and in our experience, digital wellness is an issue that's mostly led by moms inside the household. So I'd love to ask you why you think this is and how can dads take charge of this issue and be good digital role models for their kids?
Well, I think it comes down to awareness. I think you're right. And I think that, you know, in a traditional, I don't know, maybe this is bucking the norm, today, but in a traditional sense, it's always been seen that the dad is off working and providing for the family and the mom is at home being a homemaker. And so I think that there's a mindset there of that where, the mom is there and present. I think in today's world, that's not always the case. There's a lot of, there's a lot of moms who are working, who are making a living, who are providing for their family, or single moms, a ton of single moms who are just crushing it out there and doing it all, right? They've got to be the one. But I think that for dads, we have to get really, really straight on what we want out of life for our family. And for me, myself, I mentioned it a couple minutes ago, I just want my kids to be happy and reach their potential and become good adults. That's what I want.
Yeah.
Well, then I need to, even going back, if that's my what matters most and set my intentions, then I need to look within my own home at the SOS approach and go, well, wait a minute, what is causing the rift in this? And it may be that I'm not being present in my home. It may be that I'm not supporting my wife as she is supporting this digital, structure that she's trying to build in the home. And so we've got to really get on the same page with our spouses, have these conversations, and so that we can march forward together. Because when we don't, it creates too much chaos, and our kids understand when there's chaos in our homes. And so to me, it starts with being really, really hyper focused on what I want out of my family life, setting those intentions, observing that behavior, and then making those shifts and being present. And don't underestimate the power of modeling good behavior as a dad. Being present in your kid's life is the most important thing that you can possibly do. And they know when you're not being present. They know. Going back to my son, you on Instagram, and Instagram's part of my job. Like
Yeah.
I help people, I reach people. It's part of my livelihood.
Yep.
But not in the home.
Yeah.
Not in the home. Not when my kids are present. When my kids are present, they are the livelihood. There because I have to be there for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. At least in like a two-parent household, like
Yeah.
they're watching both of you, And in my experience, like I have an older son, younger daughter. My son is just enamored with my husband. Like they're looking to that role model.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is just anecdotal or if there's data that supports this, but I absolutely see it. So I think, if anything, like having that united front, I mean, for both daughters, sons, everything is so important for so many reasons. But I think the dad son thing is super, super important. I don't know if you agree with that. You said you have a son.
Well, yeah, I have two kids, two sons. I have four kids. Just, I guess for your listeners, I have a 18-year-old girl, senior in high school. I have a sophomore boy. I have a seventh grader girl, and then I have a fourth grade boy. And I think that relationship with the relationship with all my kids is very different,
Yeah.
meaning I approach it differently. I know I've learned what makes each one of them tick, how they want to be loved, and then I approach my love for them in that way. But for my boys, I recognize that they need somebody to look up to.
Yeah.
And I think in today's world, we have to be the biggest influencer in our kids' lives. And
Hmm.
if we are not, they will look elsewhere. And you don't know what they're going to see and what they're going to find. And so set that standard in your home of who you are, what you want them to become, and give them, and look, I'm not perfect. They know I'm not perfect. They see it all the time. They see my faults, but I can still strive to be perfect in everything I do and progress towards that. And they see that as well. And then I think going back to change management, have those conversations with them. Admit when
Yeah.
you've made a mistake, admit when you've messed up, show your vulnerability, show that you're real, show that you're emotional, and give them even that as a pillar to look forward to and model and emulate. And when you do that the right way, then they are going to see that and start to model that behavior and see you as the biggest influence in their life. But it all starts with being present. I think that one thing I always say is that you have to be present in the moments that require your presence. And when your
Yeah.
kids are around, nearly every moment requires your presence.
Yeah, I love that. What a great place to end it. Thank you so much for your time. I so appreciate your work. I think this last question meant a lot to me because I want to see more dads out there.
Yeah.
I love your leadership on that front and just the way you speak directly to the kids and work with that age group is just so, so needed. And I think the way you describe everything is just so simple and approachable and manageable, right? Like anybody can kind of follow the approaches you put out there. So thank you for your
Thank you.
time and for all the work you're doing. And I really appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.